The man she was about to fire had been stealing from her company for weeks. Or so she thought. Victoria Tory Hamilton stared at the security footage for the third time that week, her coffee growing cold as she watched the night janitor access areas he had no business being in. The timestamp read 11:43 p.m. David Thompson, employee ID 7294, was inserting what appeared to be a USB device into the executive computer terminal. Again. What she discovered when she followed him would change everything she thought she knew about worth, wisdom, and the people we overlook every single day. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Tory's corner office on the 32nd floor of Pinnacle Tech Tower offered a panoramic view of Austin's sprawling skyline. But tonight, the city lights couldn't distract her from the grainy black and white images on her monitor. At 34, she was the youngest CEO in the company's history, a Harvard MBA who'd clawed her way to the top through sheer determination and an almost frightening ability to see through corporate nonsense. Her success had come at a price. The framed photo on her desk showed a different woman, one with softer eyes and an unguarded smile, standing beside a tall man in a tuxedo on what should have been the happiest day of her life. That woman had believed in love, in partnership, in building something beautiful together. That woman had been a fool. The note Richard left on their kitchen counter 3 years ago was burned into her memory. I need someone who puts me first, not work. I can't compete with your ambition anymore. Don't try to find me. He'd taken nothing but his clothes and his golf clubs, leaving behind only divorce papers and a 9-year-old daughter who asked for 6 months why Daddy didn't love them anymore. Tory had answered honestly. Because some people don't know how to love anything bigger than themselves, sweetheart. That betrayal had forged her into something harder, more focused. Emotions were liabilities. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. People would always disappoint you if you let them close enough. But this situation with the janitor was different. It wasn't about broken hearts or shattered dreams. It was about protecting the company she'd built, the empire that provided for her daughter, Sophia, and the 1-200 employees who depended on Pinnacle Tech for their livelihoods. The footage showed Thompson moving with purpose through the executive floor, not the random wandering of someone lost or confused. His body language was careful, deliberate. He knew exactly where he was going and what he was looking for. Tory picked up her phone to call security, then hesitated. Something nagged at her, a detail that didn't fit the narrative of corporate espionage. In 4 years of employment, David Thompson had never missed a day of work, never filed a complaint, never asked for a raise. He was invisible in the way that service workers often were background noise in the corporate symphony. Yet here he was, night after night, accessing computers that contained Pinnacle's most sensitive data. With their biggest product launch just 3 weeks away, a leak could cost the company $50 million and destroy everything she'd worked to build. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent years learning to see through people's masks, to spot the lies and hidden agendas that lurked behind polite smiles and professional handshakes. But she'd never really looked at the man who emptied her trash can every night, who left her office spotless without ever disturbing the carefully organized chaos of her desk. Maybe that was the point. Maybe invisibility was the perfect camouflage for espionage. Tory closed the laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that made her office feel like a glass tower suspended above the world. Tomorrow she would confront David Thompson. She would demand answers. She would protect her company and her daughter's future, no matter what it cost a man she'd never bothered to know. But tonight, staring out at the city lights that twinkled like scattered diamonds, Victoria Hamilton couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make a terrible mistake. David Thompson's alarm buzzed at 4:30 p.m., the sound cutting through the thin walls of his one-bedroom apartment in East Austin like a rusty knife. He'd been awake for 10 minutes already, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a butterfly if you squinted just right. Anna used to say it was a sign that beautiful things could emerge from broken places. 3 years later, he still wasn't sure if she'd been right. The apartment smelled like the industrial pine cleaner he used at work, a scent that had seeped into his clothes, his furniture, his skin. No matter how many times he showered, he couldn't quite wash away the reminder of what his life had become. The living room served triple duty as bedroom, office, and playroom, with a pull-out couch that had seen better decades and a small table where 7-year-old Lily did her homework every afternoon while he slept. David pulled on his uniform, the same navy blue shirt and pants he'd worn for 4 years at Pinnacle Tech. The fabric was soft from countless washings, the company logo faded but still visible over his heart. Once that logo had meant something different to him. Once he'd worn it with pride. The mirror in the bathroom reflected a face that looked older than its 41 years. Premature grey threaded through his brown hair, and lines etched deep around his green eyes told stories of sleepless nights and impossible choices. He'd been handsome once, the kind of man who turned heads at conferences and commanded respect in boardrooms. Now he was invisible, just another working-class father trying to keep his head above water. Daddy Lily's voice drifted from the kitchen where she was supposed to be doing math homework. "Yeah, baby, Mrs. Garcia says you look tired. Are you sick?" David found his daughter sitting at their second-hand table, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders as she bent over worksheets covered in addition problems. She had her mother's eyes bright and curious, always seeing more than a 7-year-old should have to see. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just thinking." Lily looked up at him with the serious expression that broke his heart every single day. About Mommy. The honest answer was yes. He thought about Anna constantly. He thought about the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she hummed while cooking dinner, the way she'd held his hand in that sterile hospital room and made him promise something that seemed impossible at the time. "Promise me you'll show Lily that good people still exist in this world." She'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of machines. "Promise me you won't let them make you bitter." He'd promised, even though he wasn't sure how to keep that promise, when the world seemed designed to break good people into pieces. "I think about Mommy every day," he told Lily now, kneeling beside her chair. "But mostly I think about how proud she'd be of you. Look at these math problems. You're doing better than kids twice your age." Lily beamed the praise, lighting up her face. "Really, really, you're brilliant, just like she was." The truth was more complicated. Lily was brilliant, but she was also lonely. She spent most evenings with Mrs. Garcia, the elderly widow next door, who watched her for free because David couldn't afford a real babysitter. She did her homework alone, ate dinner alone, put herself to bed most nights because David didn't get home from his second job until after midnight. At school, other children talked about weekend trips and summer camps, activities that might as well have been on Mars for all the chance Lily had of experiencing them. Her shoes had holes that David filled with cardboard, and her backpack was held together with duct tape because new ones cost money they didn't have. But she never complained. At 7 years old, Lily Thompson had learned the hard lesson that some children learn too early, that love doesn't always come with abundance. That sacrifice is how good people show they care. David kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of the strawberry shampoo they bought with coupons from the dollar store. "I have to go to work now, Mrs. Garcia will be here in a few minutes. Will you tell me about the computers when you get home?" It was their ritual. Every morning when David returned from his shift, he would sit on the edge of Lily's bed and tell her stories about the technology he encountered at Pinnacle Tech. He transformed servers into friendly robots, described coding languages like secret alphabets made the digital world sound like a magical kingdom where anything was possible. He never told her that he used to be fluent in that language himself. That once upon a time he'd been the architect of dreams instead of the man who cleaned up after dreamers. Always, he promised. The drive to Pinnacle Tech took 25 minutes through Austin traffic, past food trucks and coffee shops where other people lived different lives. David's Ford pickup truck had 180,000 miles and a transmission that shuddered at red lights, but it got him where he needed to go. The radio had been broken for 2 years, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the sounds of a city that never quite slept. Pinnacle Tech Tower rose from the downtown landscape like a glass and steel monument to ambition. At night, illuminated against the Texas sky, it looked like something from a science fiction movie. David had helped design the software that ran in those gleaming offices back when his name appeared on patents and his opinions shaped million-dollar decisions. Now he entered through the service entrance, punching a time clock that measured his worth in dollars per hour instead of ideas per minute. The night cleaning crew was a small family of invisible people: Maria, who sent money to relatives in Guatemala; Carlos, who was studying to become a nurse; Janet, who raised 3 grandchildren while their parents deployed overseas. They nodded to each other with the quiet camaraderie of people who understood that honest work had dignity even when the world treated them like furniture. David collected his supplies from the maintenance closet, the familiar weight of the cleaning cart grounding him in routine. 32 floors to clean, 6 hours to do it, and then home to 4 hours of sleep before the cycle began again. As he pushed the cart toward the elevators, David caught his reflection in the polished lobby doors. The man staring back wore the uniform of invisibility, but his eyes still held traces of the engineer he used to be. Sometimes late at night, when the offices were empty and the computers hummed with possibilities, he allowed himself to remember who he'd been before the world taught him to disappear. Tonight would be different, though David didn't know it yet. Tonight, someone was finally going to see him. The security footage had become Tori's obsession. Monday through Friday, the same pattern repeated with clockwork precision. David Thompson would complete his regular cleaning duties by 10:30 p.m., then disappear into areas that should have been off-limits to janitorial staff. Executive suites, conference rooms, the secure server facility that housed Pinnacle's most sensitive data. Jake Morrison, head of security, spread printouts across Tori's conference table like evidence at a crime scene. At 55, Jake was a former Austin police detective who joined Pinnacle after a knee injury forced early retirement. His weathered face and skeptical eyes had seen enough corporate drama to fill several crime novels. "It's been going on for 3 weeks, Jake said, pointing to timestamps on the photographs. "Always the same routine. Finishes his shift, then makes his rounds. He's got keycards that shouldn't work on executive floors, but somehow they do." Tori studied the grainy images. In each one, David Thompson moved with purpose, not the hesitant movements of someone exploring forbidden territory. How is he accessing these areas? That's the million-dollar question. It says his keycard should only work on public areas and maintenance closets. Either someone gave him executive access, or he figured out how to hack our security. The implications sent a chill down Tori's spine. Pinnacle's new artificial intelligence platform, codenamed Phoenix, represented 3 years of development and $50 million in investment. In 2 weeks, they would announce the technology that would revolutionize how businesses processed data. If a competitor gained access to Phoenix before launch, Pinnacle could lose everything. "What do we know about Thompson's background?" Tori asked, opening his personnel file for the dozenth time. The file was frustratingly thin. David Thompson, age 41, hired 4 years ago as night custodial staff. Previous employment listed various Austin companies, but nothing in tech. Education field blank. Emergency contact. Margaret Thompson in Round Rock listed as his mother. Single father to 1 dependent. Perfect attendance record, no disciplinary actions, no complaints from supervisors or co-workers. "It's almost like he doesn't want to be noticed," Jake observed. "Or like he's hiding something." Jake rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You want me to terminate him? We could do it quietly. Claim budget cuts." Tori considered this. The safe move would be to fire Thompson immediately and change all security codes. But something about the situation didn't fit the usual patterns of corporate espionage. Industrial spies typically targeted specific information and disappeared quickly. Thompson had been at Pinnacle for 4 years, long before Phoenix existed as anything more than a concept. Not yet. I want to know what he's doing and who he's working for. Could be freelance. Sell information to the highest bidder. Or he could be working for TechFlow or DataCorp or any of our competitors. Tori stood and walked to the window, watching Austin's evening traffic crawl along Interstate 35. The timing is suspicious. 3 weeks ago, we announced Phoenix to the board. 3 weeks ago, Thompson's behavior changed. Jake gathered the photographs into a neat stack. What do you want me to do? Watch him. Document everything. If he's stealing data, I want evidence that will hold up in court. After Jake left, Tori remained at the window as darkness settled over the city. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives, worrying about normal things like soccer practice and grocery bills. She envied them their simplicity, their ability to trust that tomorrow would resemble today. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Working late again. Mrs. Patterson made mac and cheese for dinner. Saved you some? Guilt twisted in Tori's stomach. Mrs. Patterson was their neighbor, a retired teacher who watched Sophia when work kept Tori at the office past reasonable hours, which was most nights lately. On my way home, she texted back, knowing it was a lie. She had reports to review, presentations to perfect fires to extinguish. Phoenix's launch would define her legacy as CEO, prove she belonged in the glass tower that intimidated lesser executives. But first she wanted to see David Thompson's pattern for herself. At 10:45 Tori positioned herself in the empty reception area on the 28th floor, hidden behind a partition that gave her a clear view of the elevator bank. The executive floors were eerily quiet after hours. Nothing but the whisper of climate control and the distant hum of servers processing endless streams of data. The elevator chimed softly. David Thompson emerged, pushing his cleaning cart with the same methodical efficiency she'd observed on security footage. He wore earbuds connected to a phone, his head nodding slightly to music she couldn't hear. There was something almost peaceful about his movements, none of the nervous energy she'd expected from someone engaged in corporate espionage. He cleaned the reception desk thoroughly, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces with professional attention to detail. When he finished, he should have returned to the elevator and moved to the next floor. Instead, he parked his cart in an alcove and walked toward the corner office that belonged to Pinnacle's chief financial officer. Tori held her breath as David produced a keycard and swiped it at the office door. The lock clicked open without hesitation. He disappeared inside for exactly 12 minutes, emerging with something small clutched in his palm. From her hiding spot, Tori couldn't identify the object, but it was clearly something he hadn't brought with him. The pattern repeated on the 30th floor, where David accessed the chief technology officer's office for 15 minutes. Then the 31st floor, where he spent 8 minutes in the conference room, where Phoenix presentations were held. By the time he reached the 32nd floor, Tori's heart was racing. Her own office was located here, along with the secure server room that contained Phoenix's source code. If David Thompson was stealing corporate secrets, this was where he would find the crown jewels. She watched him clean the common areas with the same careful attention he'd shown on lower floors. Then, inevitably, he approached the server room. The security panel beside the door required two-factor authentication, a keycard and a numeric code known only to senior executives. David swiped his card. The panel beeped once, waiting for the code. Tori leaned forward, straining to see his fingers on the keypad. If he truly had access to executive codes, someone was feeding him information from inside the company. The thought of betrayal by a trusted colleague made her stomach churn. But David didn't enter any numbers. Instead, he pulled a small device from his pocket and connected it to the panel's data port. The device blinked red for 30 seconds, then turned green. The server room door opened with a soft, hydraulic sigh. Tori couldn't breathe. She was witnessing corporate espionage in real time, watching a janitor steal technology that could destroy everything she'd worked to build. Her finger hovered over her phone, ready to call security to end David Thompson's criminal career with a single phone call. But something held her back. Maybe it was the careful way he'd cleaned each office, showing respect for spaces that belonged to others. Maybe it was the gentle manner she'd observed when he interacted with other staff members. Or maybe it was simple curiosity about a man who'd managed to remain invisible for 4 years, while apparently planning the perfect heist. David emerged from the server room 20 minutes later, slipping the small device back into his pocket. He returned to his cleaning cart and continued his rounds as if nothing had happened. Tori remained hidden until long after the elevator carried him away, her mind racing with questions that demanded answers. Tomorrow she would follow David Thompson and discover what he was really doing with Pinnacle's secrets. But tonight, she would go home to her daughter and pretend that her world wasn't balanced on the edge of a cliff held in place by the trustworthiness of a man she'd never bothered to know. Friday evening found Tori in her BMW feeling ridiculous as she adjusted the baseball cap that was supposed to disguise her identity. The parking garage beneath Pinnacle Tech Tower smelled like exhaust fumes and concrete. A far cry from the executive suite where she usually spent her time. She'd changed from her power suit into jeans and a casual sweater, clothes that felt foreign after years of armor-like professional attire. David Thompson's shift ended at 10 p.m. sharp. Tori had positioned herself behind a concrete pillar with a clear view of his beat-up Ford pickup truck, watching for any signs that he suspected surveillance. Her hands gripped the steering wheel as doubts crept through her mind. What was she doing? She was the CEO of a $50 million company, mother to a 9-year-old daughter and holder of advanced degrees from institutions that taught strategic thinking and risk management. None of that education had prepared her for sitting in a parking garage like a private investigator from a bad movie. But Phoenix was too important to leave to chance. If David Thompson was selling Pinnacle's secrets, she needed to know where those secrets were going. If he was working for a competitor, she needed evidence that would stand up in court. At 10:07 p.m., David emerged from the service elevator, still wearing his Navy uniform and carrying a worn backpack that hadn't appeared in any of the security footage. He walked to his truck with the tired gait of a man whose day was far from over, unaware that Austin's youngest tech CEO was about to follow him into a world she'd never imagined. The pickup truck's engine turned over with a mechanical cough that echoed through the garage. Tori waited until his tail lights disappeared around the corner before starting her BMW and pulling into traffic 3 cars behind. She'd read enough spy novels to know about maintaining distance, though she suspected her dark sedan was about as inconspicuous as a diamond tiara in a honky-tonk bar. Austin's evening traffic provided perfect cover as they wound through downtown streets lined with food trucks and live music venues. The city's famous Keep Austin Weird spirit was on full display, neon signs advertising everything from gourmet donuts to vintage guitars, street musicians competing with honking horns for acoustic space. But David Thompson wasn't heading toward Austin's entertainment district. Instead, he turned east away from the glass towers and trendy neighborhoods where Pinnacle's executives lived toward working-class areas where the American dream looked different than it did in corporate boardrooms. Tori had driven through East Austin before, but always with a destination in mind, always moving quickly toward somewhere else. Tonight, following David's truck at careful distance, she noticed details that had previously escaped her attention. Yards where children's bicycles shared space with trucks whose best years were behind them. Houses where multiple families lived in spaces designed for one. Neighborhoods where people worked multiple jobs just to keep the lights on. After 15 minutes, David pulled into the parking lot of an H-E-B grocery store. The neon sign buzzed against the darkening sky, casting harsh light over cars that had seen better decades. Tori parked at the far end of the lot and watched as David walked inside his shoulders, slightly hunched with exhaustion. Through the store's large windows, she could see him moving through aisles with the focused efficiency of someone who knew exactly what he needed and how much he could afford to spend. He carried a small notebook, checking items off a list as he dropped them into his cart. Generic brands, bulk packages, nothing fancy or impulsive. Tori found herself studying this mundane ritual with surprising fascination. When had she last grocery shopped for herself, as Patterson usually handled that chore, along with most of the domestic responsibilities that kept Sophia's life running smoothly. Tori ordered groceries online when she remembered selecting items from her office during brief breaks between meetings. David spent exactly 23 minutes in the store, emerging with 2 plastic bags that seemed pitifully small given the time invested. He loaded them carefully into his truck, checking his phone before starting the engine again. This time, his route led deeper into East Austin, past auto repair shops and small churches with signs in Spanish and English. The BMW felt increasingly out of place, its leather interior and heated seats a stark contrast to the world beyond its windows. Tori had built her success by understanding markets and demographics, but she realized she'd never really considered what life looked like for people who worked in service industries, who kept companies like hers running from the shadows. David's truck pulled into the parking lot of what appeared to be a converted warehouse. The sign above the entrance read, "Eastside Community Center," in faded letters that suggested better days in the past. The building's brick facade showed wear from Texas sun and storms, but the grounds were clean and well-maintained. Tori parked across the street and watched as David retrieved his backpack from the truck, along with several boxes that he carried toward the building's entrance. The boxes appeared heavy, requiring multiple trips, but he handled them with care that suggested valuable contents. At 10:47 p.m., the community center should have been closed. Most similar facilities locked their doors by 8 or 9, sending families home to evening routines. But lights blazed through windows, and Tori could see figures moving inside. Whatever David Thompson was doing here, it wasn't a simple matter of dropping off stolen data to waiting competitors. This felt more like a regular appointment, a commitment that required his presence rather than a quick handoff of corporate secrets. Curiosity overcame caution. Tori locked her BMW and crossed the street, moving carefully toward the building. The familiar click of her heels on concrete seemed impossibly loud in the quiet neighborhood, so she slipped off her shoes and continued barefoot, grateful for the pedicure that at least made the sacrifice aesthetically acceptable. Through a window she could see into what appeared to be a classroom. Children of various ages sat at tables equipped with computers, their faces illuminated by monitor light. At the front of the room, David Thompson stood beside a whiteboard covered with diagrams that looked suspiciously like computer programming concepts. The scene was so unexpected that Tori nearly gasped aloud. The man she'd suspected of corporate espionage was teaching children, not selling secrets to competitors, but sharing knowledge with kids who probably couldn't afford private tutors or expensive coding camps. David's posture was completely different here. Gone was the invisible janitor who moved through Pinnacle's offices like a ghost. In his place stood someone confident, engaged, animated, as he explained concepts to students who hung on his every word. Tori moved closer to the window, straining to hear what he was saying. David's voice carried clearly through the thin glass, warm and patient, in a way that surprised her. Remember what we discussed about algorithm efficiency? Today we're putting that into practice. Let's build something that actually helps people. Algorithm efficiency. Tori's breath caught as recognition dawned. Those weren't just basic computer skills David was teaching. This was advanced programming, the kind of material covered in college-level courses, the kind of knowledge that required years of experience to master. She watched in fascination as David moved between workstations, offering guidance with the natural ease of someone who understood both the technology and the students using it. His explanations were clear and engaging, transforming abstract concepts into practical applications that made sense to young minds. One of the children, a girl who couldn't have been older than 10, raised her hand with a question about database management. David knelt beside her chair and walked through the answer with infinite patience, drawing diagrams on scratch paper until understanding dawned in her eyes. This was not the behavior of a man engaged in corporate espionage. This was something else entirely. Something that challenged every assumption Tori had made about David Thompson's character and motivations. But if he wasn't stealing data, how did he have access to Pinnacle's secure areas, and what was he doing with the devices she'd seen him use in the server room? The questions multiplied as Tori watched David distribute laptop computers to several of the younger children, explaining that the devices were theirs to keep. The joy on their faces was unmistakable, pure excitement at receiving technology that most of their families probably couldn't afford. "These are yours," she heard David say, as he knelt beside a boy who couldn't have been older than 8. "I've installed educational software and basic programming tools. The password is your birthday, just like we practiced." The boy hugged the laptop to his chest, like it was the most precious gift imaginable, and Tori felt something shift inside her chest. She was witnessing generosity on a scale that challenged her understanding of David Thompson's circumstances. Where was a night janitor getting money to buy laptop computers for children, and why would he choose to spend his limited resources on strangers rather than his own needs? As the evening continued, Tori remained hidden beside the window, watching as David transformed from invisible service worker to gifted teacher. The man who cleaned her office every night was clearly qualified to teach advanced technology concepts, raising questions about his background that demanded answers. When the class finally ended at midnight, children filed past David with thanks and hugs, treating him with the affection reserved for trusted mentors. He helped them pack up their materials, offering encouragement for homework assignments and reminders about upcoming projects. Tori hurried back to her BMW as families began leaving the building, not wanting to be caught in her inappropriate surveillance. But as she drove home through Austin's sleeping neighborhoods, her mind raced with new questions about David Thompson. By the time she reached her house in Westlake Hills, where Sophia was long asleep, and Mrs. Patterson had left detailed notes about dinner and homework completion, Tori had made a decision. She would find out exactly who David Thompson really was and what he was doing with Pinnacle's technology. But first, she would try to reconcile the image of a corporate spy with a man who spent his free time teaching children to code. Chris Williams heard it before he saw it. A sound that didn't belong in the peaceful autumn afternoon. Raw, desperate sobbing coming from somewhere beyond the flowering bushes near the pond. He'd come to this park for a reason, a painful one. 2 years ago today, his wife had died. And this place, her favorite spot in the world, was where he brought their 7-year-old twins Avery and Chloe to remember her, to keep her memory alive in their hearts, even as her voice faded from their minds. But now, someone else's grief was cutting through the quiet Saturday afternoon like broken glass. "Daddy, do you hear that?" Avery tugged on his sleeve, her long curly brown hair catching the light. Someone's really sad. Chris looked down at his daughters, their young faces still shadowed from their own tears about their mother. Part of him wanted to stay cocooned on their picnic blanket, honoring his wife's memory without intrusion. But the crying continued, the kind of sobbing that came from a soul completely shattered. He recognized it. He'd done it himself alone in his bedroom after the girls fell asleep night after night for 2 years. "Girls, stay right here on the blanket. Don't move, okay? Someone might need help." Chris stood and walked toward the sound, autumn leaves crunching under his feet. As he rounded the flowering bushes, he stopped cold. There, hidden in a quiet corner off the main path, sat a young woman in a wheelchair. She wore a wedding dress, a beautiful white gown with delicate lace sleeves, now stained with dirt and grass at the hem. Her veil lay trampled on the ground beside her. She had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently with each sob, making sounds like an animal in pain. Chris's heart broke for this stranger. He cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The woman's head jerked up, revealing a face ravaged by tears. Her makeup had run in dark streaks down her cheeks. Her eyes were swollen and red, and her expression was pure devastation. When she saw him, embarrassment flooded her features, and she quickly tried to wipe her face. "I'm fine," she said automatically, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I'll leave. Please don't apologize," Chris said softly, taking a careful step closer. "I'm Chris Williams." She stared at him for a long moment, her jaw clenched tight, as if she was trying to hold back a dam that was already breaking. Chris could see the war in her eyes, the desperate need to let it all out, battling against years of learned self-reliance. She swallowed hard. "I'm Serena Miller." "Serena," Chris repeated gently. "I don't want to intrude, but I can see you're going through something terrible, and I just wanted you to know that you don't have to be alone right now. Whatever happened, you don't have to carry it by yourself in this moment." Something in his tone, the genuine compassion in his eyes, seemed to crack her defenses. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling over. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Maybe not," Chris agreed. "But I know what it's like to feel completely broken, and sometimes it helps to say it out loud." Serena looked at him, really looked at him, and seemed to see something there that convinced her he was safe. She took a shaky breath. "He didn't show up." The words came out barely above a whisper. Chris waited, giving her space. "My fiancée, Serena," continued, her voice trembling. "He didn't show up to our wedding." Chris felt his chest tighten. "I'm so sorry." She stared down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "I waited at that church for over an hour. Everyone was there. All the guests, the priest, the photographers, everyone." A tear dropped onto her white dress, then another. People were throwing weird glances at me. I could see them whispering, checking their phones, looking at me with pity, and I just kept smiling, kept saying he was probably stuck in traffic, that he'd be there any minute. She stopped, her breathing ragged. Chris knelt down beside her wheelchair, making himself eye level with her. "What happened?" "He never came." Her voice broke completely. "After everything, after humiliating me in front of everyone I know, all I got was a text message." She let out a bitter, broken laugh. "A text message. Can you believe that?" Chris shook his head slowly, anger building in his chest. "He couldn't even tell me in person." Serena continued, the words pouring out faster now. "He had all the time in the world to tell me before today, but he had to wait until I was sitting there in my wedding dress with everyone staring at me like I was some kind of pathetic joke." "You're not a joke," Chris said firmly. "What he did, that's cruel." Serena fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, pulled up the message, held it out to him. Her hand was trembling so badly Chris had to steady it to read. "I've thought it over and I can't do this. I need someone complete, not a liability." The words hit Chris like a punch to the gut. "A liability," Serena whispered, pulling her phone back. "That's what I am to him." She gestured at her wheelchair, her face twisted with pain and fury. "I was in an accident 8 months ago." Chris stayed quiet, letting her talk. "Motorcycle crash. I wasn't even driving. I was just on the back of a friend's bike when a van hit us." She paused, staring at nothing. "My friend walked away fine. But me." She laughed again, that same hollow sound. "I haven't walked since." Chris felt tears burning in his own eyes. He'd been a widower for 2 years, raising his twin daughters alone, and he thought he'd seen cruelty. But this abandoning someone on their wedding day, calling them a liability, this was a different kind of heartless. "Serena, she said all the right things at first," she interrupted as if she needed to get it all out now, or she never would. "He said it didn't matter that he loved me, regardless that we'd figure it out together." She wiped her face roughly. "Serena," Chris began softly. Serena cut in, her voice trembling as if she needed to spill everything before she lost the courage. "He said all the right things at first. Said it didn't matter. That he loved me regardless, that we'd figure it out together." She wiped her face roughly, but over the months he started changing, becoming cold, distant. He'd snap at me for the smallest things. Her voice dropped. He'd make comments about how difficult everything had become, how much harder his life was now. Chris watched as she struggled with the words. "But I made excuses for him," Serena said quietly. "I told myself he was just stressed, that he needed time to adjust, that if I was just patient enough, understanding enough if I didn't complain about my pain or my struggles." She trailed off. "Why did you make excuses?" Chris asked gently. Serena looked at him, and in her eyes he saw a loneliness so deep it made his own grief feel small. "I'm an orphan," she whispered. "I grew up in foster care. Bounced from home to home. I've been alone my entire life, Chris. And he was the first person who made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I had a family." A sob caught in her throat, so I ignored the signs. I convinced myself that if I just loved him enough, he would remember why he loved me. She covered her face with her hands. "I was so stupid." "No," Chris said firmly. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. "No, Serena. You weren't stupid. You were hopeful. You were loyal. Those aren't weaknesses. Then why does it feel like I'm being punished for them?" she asked, her voice muffled behind her hands. Chris didn't have an answer for that. He just stayed there, kneeling beside her wheelchair, his hand on her shoulder as she cried. Finally she lowered her hands and looked at him. I showed the priest the text and left as fast as I could. The embarrassment, the humiliation, it was too much to bear. I called a cab to bring me here because I couldn't face going back to my apartment. I just wanted to be somewhere beautiful for a little while before I have to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. "What do you mean, figure out what to do?" Chris asked. "My apartment was temporary. We were supposed to move into his place after the wedding. Now I have nowhere to go. No family to call." She looked directly at Chris, her eyes red and exhausted. "No one who cares whether I exist or not. I'm completely, utterly alone." The rawness of her pain hit Chris like a physical blow. He found himself kneeling fully beside her wheelchair, now his own eyes burning with tears. For 2 years he had been drowning in his own grief, barely keeping his head above water as he tried to be both mother and father to Avery and Chloe. He worked his accounting job during the day and came home to homework, dinner, bedtime stories, and the crushing weight of loneliness after the girls fell asleep. He knew what it meant to feel alone in a crowded world. "Serena," he said quietly, "what he did, the way he treated you, that says everything about him and absolutely nothing about you. You're not a liability. You're a person going through something incredibly difficult, and you deserved someone who would stand beside you, not someone who would abandon you in the cruelest way possible." Serena looked at him through her tears. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Chris took a shaky breath. "Because 2 years ago today my wife died." Serena's expression shifted surprise, mixing with her grief. A distracted driver hit her car head-on, and she was gone before the ambulance even arrived. He gestured back toward the picnic blanket where his daughter sat. "And I have 2 7-year-old daughters who are sitting on that blanket right now, trying to remember what their mother's voice sounded like because it's fading from their memories. And that terrifies them. And it terrifies me." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm barely holding it together. Most days I cry in the shower so they don't hear me. I lie awake at night, terrified that I'm failing them, that I'm not enough, that they'll grow up broken because I can't be both parents no matter how hard I try." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "So when I hear someone in pain, someone who feel alone in the world, I can't just walk away because I know how dark that loneliness is. I know how it feels to wonder if you're strong enough to keep going." He looked directly at Serena. "And I need you to know that you are. You're still here, Serena. After everything you've been through, the accident, the pain, the betrayal, you're still here. That takes incredible strength." They sat there together in silence for a moment. Two strangers crying in a park connected by the universal language of grief and loss. Finally, Serena reached out and touched his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not leaving me alone." "Daddy." Both Chris and Serena looked up. Avery and Chloe had crept over despite his instructions. Their young faces filled with concern, their own eyes still red from crying about their mother. "Girls, I asked you to stay on the blanket," Chris said, gently wiping his face. "But we heard you crying, and we wanted to make sure you were okay." She looked at Serena with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Why are you crying in a princess dress?" Serena managed a trembling smile despite everything. "It was supposed to be my wedding dress, but the person I was going to marry didn't come to the wedding." "What?" Avery's face scrunched up in outrage. "That's really, really mean. Why would someone do that?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Serena said softly. "That's the meanest thing I ever heard," Chloe declared, her small hands balling into fists. "Our mummy died 2 years ago today. That's why we're at the park. This was her favorite place. Daddy says she's watching us from heaven and that she'd want us to be kind to people who are sad." The simple, honest statement made Serena's tears flow again. But this time they felt different. Less like despair and more like something breaking open in her chest. "I'm so sorry about your mommy," Serena said, her voice thick with emotion. "I bet she was wonderful. She was the best mommy in the whole world," Avery said solemnly. Then, with the matter-of-fact kindness only a child could deliver, she added, "You can share our picnic if you want. We have sandwiches and juice and cookies that Daddy made. They're not as good as Mummy's, but they're still pretty good. And you can help us feed the ducks," Chloe offered, reaching out to touch Serena's hand. "We brought extra bread." Chris looked at Serena, at this woman, who'd been so thoroughly broken by the cruelty of someone who was supposed to love her. His daughters, his beautiful, kind-hearted daughters, who'd learned compassion from their mother, were offering this stranger exactly what she needed, to not be alone. "The girls are right," Chris said. "You don't have to be alone right now. Would you join us?" "No pressure, but the offer is genuine." Serena looked between Chris and the twins, and something shifted in her expression. Hope, fragile but real, flickered in her eyes. She swallowed hard. "I would like that very much." "Thank you." What happened next surprised all of them. As Chris helped Serena navigate her wheelchair over to their picnic blanket, the girls immediately flanked her, chattering about the ducks and their school and their favorite things. And slowly, so slowly, Serena began to smile. A real smile, small at first, but growing. They fed the ducks together, the girls delighting in showing Serena the special technique their mother had taught them. Tossed the bread in an arc so the shy ducks in the back get some too. They ate sandwiches and slightly burnt cookies, and Avery insisted Serena try the juice boxes because they taste better when you drink them outside. Chris watched as his daughter's natural kindness worked a kind of magic. They didn't treat Serena with pity or awkwardness. They just treated her like a person, like a friend. And he watched Serena transform before his eyes. The devastation on her face gradually replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "Your girls are amazing," Serena said softly to Chris, as Avery and Chloe chased a particularly bold duck near the water's edge. "They get it from their mother?" Chris replied, his voice thick with emotion. He stared out at the pond, remembering the countless Saturdays they'd spend here as a family of 4. She always said that kindness costs nothing but means everything. I think she'd be proud of them today." "She would be," Serena agreed, watching the girls laugh as the duck waddled away. "And she'd be proud of you, too." As the afternoon stretched on, they talked. Really talked. Chris told you about the impossible balance of single parenthood, the guilt he carried over every little thing he couldn't do perfectly, the way he stayed up late baking cookies that never tasted quite right because he needed to honor his wife's memory somehow, the fear that his daughters would grow up with holes in their hearts that he couldn't fill. Serena shared stories from her childhood, the loneliness of foster care, the resilience she'd built moving from home to home, never quite belonging anywhere. She told him about her job at the library before the accident, how she loved being surrounded by stories and helping people find exactly the book they needed. And she told him about the 8 months since the crash, the physical therapy, the pain, the slow realization that her fiancé was pulling away even as she needed him most. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Chris found himself not wanting the day to end. This stranger had become someone important in the span of a few hours, not because of romance or attraction, but because of something deeper, a recognition of shared pain and resilience. Serena, Chris said as they prepared to part ways. "I know we just met, but I'd like to give you my number. If you ever need someone to talk to or help with anything, please call or text me. I mean it." Serena's eyes filled with fresh tears, but she was smiling. "I'd like that. And here, let me give you mine, too." They exchanged phones, each typing in their contact information. When Chris handed hers back, Serena held it for a moment, staring at his name on her screen. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I did to deserve meeting you all today, but I'm so grateful. Daddy always says the universe puts people in our path when we need the most," Chloe announced, hugging Serena's arm. "Maybe we all needed each other today. Maybe we did." Sweetheart Chris agreed, his heart feeling lighter than it had in 2 years. Maybe we really did. 3 days later, Chris's phone rang while he was making dinner. "Hello, it's Chris. It's Serena from the park." "Serena." Chris smiled, his heart lifting. "I'm so glad you called. How are you doing?" There was a pause then. "Better than I thought I'd be. I found a support group for people with spinal injuries. First meeting is tomorrow. I'm nervous, but I'm going to try." "That's incredible," Chris said, genuine pride in his voice. "That takes real courage. I keep thinking about what you said, that I'm still here. That has to mean something, right? It means everything." They talked for over an hour that night about everything and nothing. And when they finally hung up, Chris realized he was smiling wider than he had in years. The next week, Serena called again this time to tell him about the support group, how terrifying and wonderful it had been to meet others who understood. Chris told her about Chloe's latest drawing, a picture of their day at the park with Serena included as part of the family. "She drew me." Serena's voice caught with emotion in purple. Chris confirmed her favorite color. "She says purple is for special people." 2 weeks after they met, Chris invited Serena back to the park. She came, and this time the girls brought drawings they'd made for her and a list of book recommendations from Avery that was 3 pages long. "You really weren't kidding about the enthusiasm," Serena laughed, looking at the list. "I warned you," Chris said, grinning. They made it a weekly ritual. Every Saturday they'd meet at the park. Sometimes they'd feed the ducks. Sometimes they'd just sit and talk while the girls played. And slowly, week by week, Serena began to heal. Not just from the wedding that never happened, but from a lifetime of feeling like she didn't belong anywhere. 1 month became 2, and then Serena started joining them for dinners at Chris's house. The first time she came over, the girls had decorated the entire living room with welcome signs and balloons. "This is too much," Serena said, tears in her eyes. "It's not enough," Avery declared. "Seriously, we're really happy you're here." The dinners became a regular thing, twice a week, then 3 times. Serena would help the girls with homework, teach them about her favorite books, listen to their stories about school with genuine interest. She video called them on the nights she wasn't there, just to say goodnight. And Chris watched as his daughters, who'd been so sad for so long, started to smile more, laugh more. They still missed their mother, and they always would. But Serena wasn't replacing her. She was filling a different space in their hearts. 6 months after they met, Chris found himself on his porch with Serena after the girls had gone to bed. "Do you ever think about that day in the park?" "How close I came to giving up all the time," Chris admitted. "And I think about how close I was to staying on that blanket, to not investigating the crying, how easily we could have missed each other. But we didn't," Serena said, reaching for his hand. "The universe put us in each other's path, exactly when we needed it most." Chris squeezed her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Chloe was right that day. We all needed each other." Serena turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the porch light. "Chris, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you," she whispered. "I love you and those amazing girls. You've given me a reason to believe in happiness again, in family and belonging somewhere." Chris felt his heart swell. He'd been afraid to say at first, afraid it was too soon, afraid she might not feel the same way, but hearing those words from her unlocked something in his chest. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made our family whole in ways I didn't think were possible. The girls and I, we were just surviving before, but now we're living again." They kissed under the stars. 2 broken people who'd found their way to wholeness in each other. 12 months after they met, Serena moved into an accessible apartment just 10 minutes from Chris's house. She'd gotten a job doing digital cataloging for a library network remote work that allowed her flexibility and brought back her love of books. But more than that, she was part of their daily lives now. She came over for breakfast before the girls went to school. She helped Chris with grocery shopping and meal planning. She attended every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every dance recital. The girls started calling her Rena with casual affection. They ran to her first with scraped knees and exciting news. They sought her advice on friendship problems and showed her their latest artwork before anyone else. And Chris fell more in love with her every single day. 24 months after they met, they returned to the park together. This time it wasn't just to remember his wife. It was to celebrate how far they'd all come. "This is where it all started," Serena said softly as they reached their spot by the pond. "The worst and best day," Chris agreed, kneeling beside her in her wheelchair. "Finding you so broken and realizing that maybe we could heal each other. You saved my life that day," Serena said, her eyes shining with tears. "All 3 of you. I thought I'd lost everything, but really I'd just shed the wrong person to make room for the right ones." "Group hug," Avery called, and suddenly all 4 of them were tangled together, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love our family," Chloe declared. "Mommy would be happy we found each other, right?" "Daddy?" Chris looked at his daughters, at Serena, at this beautiful, unexpected family they'd built from broken pieces. "Yes, sweetheart. I think she'd be very happy." "We didn't replace her. We just made room in our hearts for more love." 3 years passed like chapters in a beautiful book. Serena had moved in with them after 2 years of dating, taking things slowly, building trust brick by brick. The house had been modified for her wheelchair, but more importantly, It had been transformed by her presence into a real home. She was there for everything. First days of school, lost teeth, bad dreams, good report cards. She wasn't trying to replace their mother. She honored that memory alongside Chris. But she'd become something essential family. And Chris had learned something profound. That loving again didn't mean forgetting. That his heart was big enough to hold both his wife's memory and this new, unexpected love. That healing didn't mean the pain disappeared. It meant learning to carry it alongside joy. One evening after the girls had gone to bed, Chris found Serena in the backyard looking up at the stars. His hands were shaking not from grief this time, but from nervous anticipation. The girls were in on the plan. They'd helped him pick out the ring 2 weeks ago, sworn to secrecy, with the seriousness only 10-year-olds could muster. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her wheelchair. "Remember when we met? How you said you'd lost everything I remember," Serena said, smiling. "I was so wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I just cleared space for something better. These 3 years with you have been." Chris took a breath. "You've reminded me what it means to be happy. You've shown my girls that family isn't just biology. It's choosing each other every single day. And I want to keep choosing you, every day for the rest of my life." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Serena Miller, will you marry me?" Serena's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But unlike that day in the park 3 years ago, these were tears of pure joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." From the upstairs window, 2 small faces pressed against the glass, grinning from ear to ear. The wedding was small and intimate, just close friends. Serena's support group, family co-workers from Chris's firm, and of course Avery and Chloe as junior bridesmaids, in dresses they'd helped pick out. This time there was no empty church, no pitying glances, no cruel text message. This time when Serena waited at the altar, Chris was already there, tears streaming down his face as he watched her come down the aisle. And when she reached him, he whispered, "I see you. All of you, and you're perfect." "I see you too," Serena whispered back. "And we're home." The girls stood beside them, holding hands, completing the circle. When the officiant pronounced them married, Avery and Chloe cheered so loud the entire room erupted in laughter. And as Chris kissed his bride, his partner, his best friend, his family, he thought about that day in the park 3 years ago. How grief had brought him there. How grief had brought her there too. And how sometimes the universe breaks us open not to destroy us, but to rebuild us into something stronger. 1 month after the wedding, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, the 4 of them returned to the park. They spread out their quilted blanket near the pond, in the exact spot where everything had changed. Chris unpacked sandwiches and juice boxes. Serena had baked cookies, really good ones this time. Avery had brought a book to read aloud. Chloe had brought bread for the ducks. "Remember when we first met here?" Serena asked, looking at the flowering bushes where Chris had found her. "How could I forget?" Chris said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "You were crying in a wedding dress, and now I'm here after wearing a wedding dress that actually meant something." Serena laughed. "It's not funny," Avery said seriously, looking up from her book. "It's like destiny, like in the stories." "Maybe it is," Chris agreed. He looked at his daughters, at Chloe feeding the ducks with focused determination, at Avery already lost in her book, at Serena, smiling beside him, wearing the simple gold band that matched his own. His family complete and whole in ways he'd never imagined possible 3 years ago. "You know what," Serena said softly, watching the sunlight dance on the water. "That day when my fiancé didn't show up, I thought it was the end of everything. But it was really the beginning. I had to lose the wrong person to find my real family." Chris kissed her temple. And I thought I'd lost my chance at happiness forever. But you taught me something important, that the heart doesn't replace love, it just expands to hold more of it. Is this too mushy? Chloe called from the water's edge. Because it's getting really mushy over there. They all laughed, and Chris pulled both girls into a group hug with Serena at the center. One day Chris said to his daughters, "When you're older, I hope you remember this, that some of the worst days of our lives lead to the best ones. That family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up especially when it's hard. And that kindness matters always. We'll remember Daddy Avery promised." As they settled in for their picnic, the pond shimmering in the afternoon light, Chris looked around at his family and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. They'd all been broken in different ways, but together they'd built something unbreakable. They'd built a family not by replacing what was lost, but by making space for what was found. Not by forgetting the past, but by honoring it while embracing the future. Not by chance, but by choice, choosing each other every single day. And in that quiet park where grief had once brought them together, love kept them whole. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you of the power we all have to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, and sometimes our darkest moments lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Please don't just watch and walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join our channel for more stories that restore your faith in humanity. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted, and that even in our broken moments, we're never truly alone. Your support helps us bring more heartwarming stories like this one. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin in the most unexpected ways.